we have a quorum, so Commissioner Robertson is going to be running the show today. So whenever you're ready, I think we can get started.
All right, great. Good morning, everyone. As usual, the first order of business is the statement regarding the virtual nature of the meeting platform. The project subcommittee of the Critical Area Commission is holding this meeting virtually. This meeting is being held using Google Meets and will be streamed live to the public. The public will be able to view the meeting from the Commission's website, and the meeting will be closed captioned. Minutes of the meeting will be provided on the Critical Area website. I'll turn it back over to the Critical Area Commission to go through roll call.
Okay. Excuse me, I just took a bite of my apple. I'm going to call off the commissioners that I see. If I miss you, please let me know. I have Commissioner Grant, Commissioner Bradford, Commissioner Bland, Commissioner Patel, Commissioner Palma, Commissioner Morgan, Commissioner Hance, and Commissioner Robertson. Is there anyone I missed? There is someone on by phone, but
Commissioner Bland by phone, correct?
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, fantastic.
All right, we can check off the first order of business and we can move on to the second order, which is approval of the February 25th project committee minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Commissioner Grant, motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Grant. May I have a second motion to approve?
Commissioner Hance, second.
Thank you. Any amendments or discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please unmute and say aye.
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 All right. Any denials? And any abstentions? Great. We can move on to the next order on the agenda, which is the one and only project that the project committee will hear, which is the Baltimore City's Western Sanitation Yard renovation, where the city is presenting for information only, so there will be no vote today. Maggie White will be presenting on the proposed expansion of the Western Sanitation Yard, so I will turn the meeting over to Maggie.
Perfect. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. And can everybody see that?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Maggie, and I am bringing forward the Baltimore City project for the Western Sanitation Yard redevelopment. This is coming forward for information only today. I have on call with me Grace Hansen from Baltimore City Department of Planning, Antoine Bird and Daniela Hutcherson with Baltimore City Department of Public Works should be on the call as well to help answer questions. And Faith Azell and Sean O'Donnell should be here as well. So the site we're talking about today is 701 Reed Bird Avenue, and it is located in southern Baltimore along the Patapsco River. It is approximately 55 acres, with 31 acres being within the critical area resource conservation area. Prior to its current use, the site acted as an open dump with a waste incinerator. The landfill was used for waste collection from 1933 to 1977. The incinerator was closed in 1975, and the landfill was capped in 1981. The site as it exists today is currently used as a residential drop-off site for mixed waste, such as yard waste, furniture, appliances, and recyclables. The sanitation yard also functions as a staging area for part of the city's waste collection fleet. And the city estimates that roughly half of Baltimore City is served by this sanitation yard. The site today does not meet the current needs of Baltimore City. There are safety concerns around the flow of traffic on the site and the traffic backup onto Reed Bird Avenue. I will let the city talk more on the safety concerns a little later in this presentation. The site grand overview does not provide safe parking for employees or safe ingress and egress of residents dropping off waste. Additionally, the city is seeking to use the building on site as a gathering and training facility for DPW employees. Representatives, again, will speak more on these uses a little later in this presentation. And again, the project today is coming forward to the commission for information only because the proposal to redevelop and expand a non-conforming use within the resource conservation area will require conditional approval. The approximate LOD associated with the project is 9.71 acres, with 4.97 acres being lot coverage within the critical area portion of the site. This would equate to approximately 14.09% of lot coverage within the RCA, staying within the 15% lot coverage limit. There are no habitat protection areas on site that are being impacted by this project. There is, however, a developed woodland on the site that the city is trying to preserve to the greatest extent possible. Here you can get a better idea of the topography of the site, given the landfill cap. We mentioned earlier that this site was a landfill that was capped off, and this has caused some grading constraints within the site. So approximately 37 acres of the site are considered unbuildable due to the grading constraints associated with this landfill cap. Though this land cannot be used for construction purposes, the city is working with MDE to devise a planting plan to bring in fresh topsoil and provide mitigation plantings in the form of shallow root vegetation as to not disturb the landfill cap. And here you can see the extent of the site that is located within the RCA. This aerial shows the site as it exists today with the current impervious outlined in red. And this is an overlay that I did, so this shows the approximate impervious surface coverage associated with the new developments being brought forward today. And this overlay shows the red outline that shows the extent of the proposed developments within the critical area portion of the site. As a reminder, these are what the current conditions on the site are. There is currently an administrative building, a maintenance and storage building, and a truck wash on the site. The current administration building and other modular buildings are highlighted in red on this plan. The proposed development that we will get into on later slides will keep the administration building, which is the bottom left-hand rectangle, and just replace some of the modular buildings and expand on that administration building. The current paved parking area here has 46 truck parking spots and 38 parking spots for smaller vehicles, and a fuel tank, which is located within the paved parking area, as well as a paved residential waste drop-off area. And you can see the critical area boundary here in yellow on this slide. All right, so this is the proposed developments, and we'll go through it one by one, but here is the critical area boundary shown on this slide in yellow. These are covered structures on the site. Again, that administration building that is staying and being expanded on, and the replacement of the modular buildings on site. And I did outline the fuel tank as well. This slide shows the proposed bioretention ponds that will be put on the site. This slide shows the proposed staff parking. The proposed staff parking will be expanded from the 46 spots that I mentioned previously to about 89 spots. This one shows truck parking for DPW vehicles, and this is proposed to be about 126 spots. And then highlighted in the dark green on this slide are additional parking for public use. Up in the upper left-hand corner would be recycling drop-off, and there are also other residential drop-off areas outlined on this slide. Again, this project today is being presented for information only, so the mitigation numbers that I'll be mentioning coming up are preliminary mitigation estimates. The Baltimore City afforestation requirement will be met by the on-site planting of 93 2-inch caliber trees. The 10% phosphorus reduction requirement is estimated to be 7.75 pounds per year. 3.82 pounds per year will be met through the installation of the micro bioretention ponds that I showed in those previous slides. The remainder will be met through fee in lieu, which the city is estimating to be about around $176,000. The city is proposing vegetation clearing mitigation as well, which I will discuss on the next slide. So in green on this, you can see some of the trees that have now been confirmed to be prior mitigation plantings associated with other projects near the site. Not all of these trees are proposed to be removed. These are just a rough overview of some plantings that are on or near the site that are prior mitigation plantings. As of the submittal of this packet, forest and vegetation clearing is proposed to be met with 3-to-1 mitigation. However, this number is currently being coordinated with the City Office of Sustainability and will likely be 4-to-1 because of the removal of previous mitigation plantings. Additional requirements that cannot be met on site with on-site plantings will be met through mitigation offset fees. And this table at the bottom is directly from the Baltimore City Camp Manual and shows the mitigation requirements for the removal of prior mitigation. I'm going to turn the floor over now to representatives from the city to speak more on the safety and parking needs of the site.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Antoine Bird. I'm the Chief of Disposal Services for Baltimore City, and I'll just be walking through a couple of slides. But I'll start off by just saying that I really appreciate everyone's time this morning and the opportunity to present this project and get some feedback. As we start on this slide, I just want to do a quick orientation. So this slide, the map shows the 5 residential recycling centers that Baltimore City has for its residents to use for the collection of their waste and recyclables from household activities. So the location we're talking about today is indicated at number 3. So as a residential recycling center without this particular site in use, it services the Southwest Baltimore side of the city. Residents would have to utilize the Quarantine Road landfill as the closest residential recycling center, which is oriented with number 2 on the map, or venture further north into the city to either the Northwest Transfer Station indicated by number 1 or the Sisson Street location indicated by number 5. So as you can see, like this location is just a strategic hub for the southwest portion of the city. As a collection and sanitation yard, it services the entire northwest and southwest side of the city for curbside collections for trash and recycling. Why this location? So we have explored alternative sites as part of the evaluation for larger solid waste facilities, some of which we are looking to move forward with in the future as we really dig into moving from a disposal oriented organization to a zero waste minded and waste diversion minded organization. Some of these other facilities that we plan on developing would not meet the conditional use for this site at all. But additionally, the overall goal is to be able to continue to provide the services and benefits that are currently there, just in a more modernized fashion for the residents that they currently serve. Can we go to the next slide? So when we talk about the facility safety improvements and just overall public impact, a couple of things I'd like to highlight is that in 2024, the city had the Inspector General do a report on the findings of this particular site. And what came out of it was that the site was in need of significant renovation. There were multiple health and safety concerns with the site that this project will address. Overall, when we're talking about things such as heating and AC issues, replacing temporary structures that have been there for 20 to 25 years with more permanent structures, and then increasing employee safety and employee parking ability. All of these things would be addressed with this project. From a public safety perspective, what we're trying to do is create an ease of flow. So dedicated traffic for the public to enter the site, utilize the facility for residential drop-off center, but then have a separate interest for our larger commercial vehicles that are servicing the curbside collection and having them completely separate from one another. The driving behaviors of the public in the commercial sector kind of dictates that it's a safer environment for everyone. Additionally, what it does is it alleviates backup traffic that's on Reed Bird Avenue. In today's world, a lot of our employees park on Reed Bird Avenue as an opportunity just to be able to have a place to park on site. We don't currently have enough parking to be able to accommodate that. So that is one of the key challenges for the site in its current condition. Again, we talked about the aging facilities. The administrative building that is currently there in brick has been there since the 60s. And then to supplement that, we've utilized modular trailers over the last 25 years or so, which all of them are in desperate need of repair and replacement. So again, this addresses the safety risk with the failing infrastructure. And then more importantly, it does not allow for a holistic training space for the entire site to get together and host meetings, whether around safety activities or just overall modernized ways to go about our business. Currently, we will have to send people all the way across town to be able to find a suitable facility to host them. So what we plan to do with this upgrade is just expand on-site parking to be able to move that traffic off of Reed Bird Avenue to allow a better flow throughout the day. We will renovate the administrative building that's currently there and has been there since the 60s, and then repair and replace any obsolete structures with an addition to the site. Additionally, we want to address public safety, like I said, with the elevated drop-off center, the dedicated recycling zones to improve traffic flow, and then just getting that traffic off of Reed Bird Avenue so that they can actually queue on site instead of backed up on that road. So from here, we'll just go to the next slide.
Perfect. Thank you. So with all of that in mind, we will turn this over to the committee for discussion. Some of the things that we would like the committee to consider today is there an opportunity for the city to reduce lot coverage and or further minimize impacts to the critical area to better align with the spirit and intent of the critical area law and regulations? Has the city investigated other options to provide facility needs and adequate parking that would avoid and or minimize impacts to the resource conservation area? What type of parking analysis was completed that justifies the parking increase? And are permeable pavers feasible for this site? So with that, I will turn it over. Thanks.
All right, great. I guess I was planning on, having those discussion questions kind of lead or kick off the discussion piece for the project committee. So can the city speak to, I guess, kind of their alternatives analysis on what efforts they made in order to reduce the lot coverage and the efforts that were made to minimize impacts to the critical area buffer in order to kind of meet the spirit and intent of the critical area law?
Sure. Antoine, would you like me to speak to this?
Yeah, if you could, appreciate it, Sean. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for letting us present. I just wanted to kind of go through these discussion points in a little more detail. My name is Sean O'Donnell. I'm with Geosyntec. We're the design engineers for the city on this project. So first off, starting with reducing lot coverage and minimizing impacts. So the first thing that Maggie touched on in the presentation was the potential that we may be impacting mitigation trees as part of the development. So those trees are located very close to the limit of disturbance for the proposed redevelopment. We are actually planning on having another site visit soon to look at a supplemental forest stand delineation to confirm the location, species, and condition of those mitigation trees. And then we are planning on updating our design so that we don't impact those trees. So that's one way that we are going to adjust the design to minimize impacts. Secondly, looking at lot coverage. So as Antoine indicated in his slides, the current lot coverage reflects a few necessary components of the site. So the first is separate drive lanes and queuing space for residents and workers and trucks. So right now, all residential traffic and truck traffic is in and out through the same entrance and uses the same drive lanes, which is a safety hazard at the site. So just trying to separate those traffic flows is one of the reasons why the lot coverage has expanded. And that's really just a health and safety consideration for traffic at the site. The space also includes space for roll-off trucks to collect from the residential drop-off area, which is, oh, sure, absolutely. I think I can share screen. Is that correct? I will try. All right. Let's see.
Yeah, sometimes you need to be a co-host in order to have.
Yeah, if it doesn't work, I'll promote you. Okay, there we go.
Okay, excellent. All right, you guys can see the drawing set?
If you can enlarge it a little bit, that would
Oh,
be
sure.
helpful.
Yeah, I'm going to go here. I'm going to go on this guy. Can you guys see my screen? See everything?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, what I'm talking about here is, and I guess I can start from existing conditions. At the site currently, it's very tight. So this is the only entrance to the site right here off of Reedbird Avenue. So both residential traffic and truck traffic uses the same entrance. Trucks typically park around the periphery of the site, all the way back to the back of the parking lot. Residents and workers kind of park wherever they can around near the office trailers right here and by the admin building. And then this area right here functions as a residential drop-off. So there's roll-off dumpsters here for residents to drop off waste. So when residents come, they're kind of commingling with the truck traffic. They're trying to, drop off waste, put waste into and over the edges of dumpsters while traffic is passing by. There's no good place for them to park, which is a safety hazard on the site. So the idea was when we redeveloped, and let me see, sorry, right here, is to separate the flows so that all truck traffic would basically enter into this area. This would become the truck parking area and just for trucks. Excuse me, and then residential traffic would enter through here and be directed directly to the back of the site where they could access their separate residential drop-off. This is a retaining wall, so it keeps everything separate, allows them to safely dump over the wall into the dumpsters instead of having to heave the waste over the edges of the dumpsters and then exit with their own exit lane. So that it keeps the traffic completely separate and then also keeps vehicles from queuing on Reedbird Avenue, which is another problem at the site. The last real kind of concern for the site. So again, we wanted to separate those traffic flows for safety. And then we also wanted to get parking situated. So as indicated in Antoine's presentation, if you saw in that photo, parking is extremely tight at the site and most workers end up parking on Reedbird Avenue. So what we wanted to give them was a space to park on the facility in a safe manner. So we do have a worker parking area down here. Again, the site does serve half the city, so you may look at this and say, wow, that's a lot of parking spaces. It is a lot of parking spaces, but there are between 250 and 300 workers who work at the site. So this is, the amount of parking spaces that are required for those workers. And there are expected to be 77 collection vehicles and 16 additional trucks parking at the site and operating out of the site to serve fully half of the city. So that is the reason why there are so many truck parking spaces. Those trucks have to be parked, in a locked and secure location, and also in a safe location, while they're not operational on the streets. All right. So I think and then the last thing for lot coverage is just to get the lot coverage again, is the fact that this is a former landfill. So actually a dump. So this is an open dump site. It was capped with a soil cap in the 80s. However, there is known hazardous material that was dumped at this site. It was on the state Superfund list from the 80s to, I think, 1999. And it is under the jurisdiction of the Land Restoration Program and MDE as a Superfund site. And so from that perspective, we are walking a bit of a tightrope here between the Land Restoration Program, who would like to see more impervious cover at the site to prevent infiltration, so that we don't get mobilization of potential contaminants in the subsurface. And then obviously working with the city in the critical area and trying to reduce impermeable cover to the maximum extent practicable to, allow for plantings. So there is a bit of a kind of a, MDE, Land Restoration, would like to see more impervious cover. We're obviously trying to minimize that by meeting the spirit of the critical area. But that's sort of the spot that we're in with respect to lot coverage and reducing impacts. Any questions on that so far?
I have a quick question related to, you said that there's about 100 and some staff that work there, but on any given day, obviously not all of the staff are working. So like during a shift, like what's usually like the maximum number of staff that would be working at a given period of time? Because I think that would, that would probably be like a better representative of how much parking space that would be needed at any given time.
So,
Oh, yes, sir. Antoine, go ahead.
yeah, that 100 or so number is pretty accurate for how many people would be there at any given time. So, well, they would start their day there, be parked on site, and would take the waste vehicles or rear loaders off the site to go throughout the city. But their rear vehicles would still be on site until they return from the end of their shift. So that's just kind of the nature of the work. They were starting in their day at the site. But they wouldn't necessarily be there all together, except for in the mornings and in the evenings. But throughout the middle of the day, it would be kind of a flow of people in and out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to
And then-
elaborate on that. Oh, sorry.
Well, no, and I do know that there's the rec center that's adjacent to the facility.
Yeah.
I've only been there a few times, and I know when I've been there, like that parking lot didn't appear to be like full or at capacity. So has there been any conversation with using that facility and developing some kind of path through that I guess probably the mitigation area to the facility? Any other like kind of offsite parking, has that been evaluated or looked at?
Yeah, so we've looked at that as an option. The challenge with the rec center is that, from a day to day, if it's just operating as the rec center, then parking is available. But on days when they have events, which is pretty often, that parking lot is completely full.
All right, and then I'll open it up. Any other commissioners, I guess, related to that kind of that first question, have any comments or questions specific to that? If you do, raise your hand, your virtual hand. And if not, this actually might be a good segue into, I guess, like my question kind of leads into the next question about what has, the city done, like looking into other options to provide the facility needs and adequate parking that would avoid and minimize the impacts to the critical area. So you touched briefly on the rec center. I guess, is there anything else that you've looked at?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can touch on that a little bit. So, I mean, the one thing that we have done is we have expanded the development as far as we can into the buildable area that's outside the critical area. So this is the critical area line. If you can still see my screen right here, this dashed line, and the start of the steep slopes on the landfill cap start right here. That area is unbuildable because we would have to excavate into the soil cap, into the waste, which would be a safety hazard. Obviously, it's opening up a true can of worms, I would say, if you're opening up a landfill, right, with potentially hazardous waste. So we wanted to avoid it impacting this area. We're also getting into the habitat protection area down here that we wanted to avoid. So we did maximize the extent of the development outside of the critical area as much as we possibly could before we expanded back into the critical area. That being said, the only other place that is available, like you said, the rec center next door, we did explore. Everything else is not city-owned property, so that really would just be parking along Reed Bird for the workers.
All right, Chair Fisher.
Thank you, Tammy. And thank you to the folks from the city who are here today to talk us through all the planning and thought that's gone into this. Wondering about like long-term big picture. Is this the long-term solution for especially the trucks? Is this where you anticipate operations being centralized, say, over the next 15, 20 years? Or is this a more shorter term objective with other plans in the longer range?
Oh no, this is a long-term solution, but I'll let Antoine speak to that.
Yeah, no, I agree. This is a long-term solution. This facility has been used for this activity for probably 40 years or so. And our expectation is to continue to do so, which is part of the reason why we are looking to, bring this up to a more modernized safety standard for the team that currently works out of here, but additionally just providing additional features that would allow it to be comfortable for people in the future as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Hans?
Hi, good morning. And thank you for this presentation and really thorough explanation of the site. I was curious, you had mentioned earlier that the city is thinking long-term about moving towards a more circular and zero waste mindset. And as someone who lives in a community that also does like a residential drop-off loop, this does seem way safer than how you've described initially. But I was curious, in all of the drop-offs that have been planned so far, I guess this is towards the rear of the facility, is it all intended for like your kind of traditional recycling and trash, or is there also going to be planned an organics diversion, like yard or food waste? Just because that is in spirit, right? Kind of like that regenerating healthy soil. And I'm just wondering, like, if this design is inclusive of that, if it's, or if that is something that is in the works for later, or, I'm just thinking towards, especially if the site is in need of additional soil, like layers of soil to build upon for safe plantings that don't go through into the cap. I'm wondering if organics, any organics recycling was a plan for the site.
Yeah, so the site would actually accept food waste as a material stream, but we wouldn't be looking to process that on site. So one of the plans the city has is to develop a compost facility actually on the east side of Baltimore, where that material would ultimately end up for processing.
Okay, so it'd be kind of like a dumpster drop-off situation, but this would become part of the city's organic waste collection then? Am I understanding that correct?
Correct, in the future, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if I could chime in here, good morning, everyone. This is Faith Ezel with Geosyntec, as well as the project manager from Geosyntec side. If we go further up on this, the map that we're looking, we actually have a covered recycling area. I want to bring that up because that is where the collection of those materials that, the e-waste and some of the other waste streams that we talked about earlier would be collected. I wanted to note that also because the current facility in its orientation does not have a covered area for the recycling of goods. So obviously that's a stormwater concern. There was a picture in the presentation on one of the later slides that kind of showed how those are currently stored when there is a drop off of e-waste. So this provides a covered area using kind of a pole barn structure for the collection of those materials, which would include, food waste and textiles and other recyclable materials.
Yeah. And just to add to that a little bit, it also adds flexibility. So to your point of, as the city transitions more towards a zero waste future, the types of materials that will be collected at this site will change. Less waste, more recyclable streams. And so the reason that we have, the number of bays back here that we have, these would be large roll-off containers, dumpsters, is to provide space for, in the beginning, maybe 4 of them would be used for waste, 2 or 3 for recyclables, 1 for metals. In the future, we could expand the number of recyclable materials that could be collected here, organics potentially, as that becomes a larger waste stream. And like Faith said, the covered area allows flexibility in the types of materials that can be collected there as well. For example, white goods and electronics that really shouldn't be on the ground or exposed to stormwater runoff. So, but that was the idea, to make it flexible.
Commissioner
is
Hand?
yeah, thank you. This is super helpful, and I do think that there could be a real opportunity here, because I know, you know, when I started composting, the amount of like solid waste that my family produced was basically halved. And you know, recycling becomes the biggest portion of the waste stream rather than the smallest. I'm wondering if there is an opportunity to incorporate some signage and educational information while people are like waiting to do that drop off, right? Because they're going to be kind of lined up there, if I'm picturing this accurately. One about like maybe when you're entering the critical area, right? And like what that is, like it's a teaching moment. Two, a little bit about like the value of separating the waste. And could even incorporate history about the site, to give people kind of an appreciation of the like what they're doing, right? The fact that if they're separating their waste and they're, you know, composting their organics separately from everything else, like the value that they're contributing back, you know, in the future when the larger composting facility is up and ready, there's going to be soil that's generated from it. If that's used for future plantings on site, highlighting that, right? Like just kind of showing the waste stream in action could be, I don't know, with our critical area things when we can't always accomplish the full, reductions or mitigations on site. Education is one of the ways that we could, maybe help them improve upon that.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, hey, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's exactly what we were thinking as well. At signage as folks are coming into the facility, as well as potential signage near some of the micro bioretention areas is also an opportunity to educate the public. But that's exactly what we were thinking as well. And I did also want to note that we will have EV chargers that are planned currently in the smaller lot off of the proposed building addition area, if you can see that. But we've also designed this facility as well for, potentially converting, for example, for the trucks and some of the load packers, leaving enough room for, hopefully when that transition comes to more EV vehicles and fleet, leaving some room so that could be accommodated at that time. So just also wanted to note that, but definitely wanting to have education as a major point of this renovation is important. Also noting that with the proposed building addition, that will also act as a training space as well as just welcoming employees who report to this facility. It allows, as Antoine was speaking on earlier, health and safety meetings and things that DPW just doesn't have within their network on site and would have to use off-site resources to accommodate a meeting that large, as well as potential community meetings and other educational opportunities. It allows for a space large enough for that without causing a traffic issue or a parking issue on the residential street of Reed Bird Avenue.
Thanks. That's really helpful. I know the University of Maryland Extension Office has partnered sometimes with DPWs. I'm not sure if you already are working with them on, they do like compost educational workshops and stuff like that. It could be a cool cross-pollination.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I have like one more follow-up that you just piqued by mentioning the bioretention ponds. Can you speak a little bit to like the vegetation plan, whether that's native or like you mentioned shallow root, so I'm not sure what kind of things you're planning for the bioretention, and hopefully that's an opportunity for kind of maximizing plantings as much as possible on site.
Yes, absolutely. So we are still working out the exact species. They will all be native. So we have a planting list. I kind of touched on this a little bit before, but the planting list also has to be approved by the land restoration and solid waste programs of MDE because they have to be, approved so that they're not going to damage the cap. But that being said, we do have a planting list that's all native species that would be planted within the microbiome retention areas and then also around the peripheries of the site. So, I mean, if you can tell here that this area just is within the LOD because it's for soil stockpiling and it has to be regraded just for stormwater runoff. This area would be full of plantings as well, where we'd have like more woody vegetation trees. The microbiome retention areas, I actually have it in here. We can look at it, but this is the conceptual landscaping plan. So one thing to touch on is because we are on top of a hazardous landfill, we're actually only allowed to have woody vegetation in areas where we have at least 6 feet of soil. And then we're only allowed to use shallow rooted woody vegetation so that the root zone doesn't extend more than 6 feet. So that is one limitation of the site, although we've addressed that by importing fill for most of this development because we were trying to avoid excavation to the maximum extent practicable because obviously we don't want to excavate through the cap. So we are importing enough fill to have plantings over most of this area. The actual plantings within the microbiome retention areas are hatched here. And right now they're shown as ground cover primarily, although our next iteration we're actually incorporating woody vegetation and trees within here as allowed by MDE. But like I said, we are a little limited in what we can plant, but we are trying to plant natives and, as much canopy as we possibly can.
All right, great. I think we've talked a lot about the parking, but I don't know if we spoke, if you spoke specifically to like a parking analysis that was completed to really kind of help develop that number. Is there anything more that you can provide related to how you came up with the parking space numbers?
Sure, absolutely. So the first step of this renovation was a master plan. As part of the master planning process, we did look at planning horizons, so looking out 30 plus years into the future as to what the projected needs for the city would be in terms of the collection fleet and in terms of number of workers that would report to the facility at any given time. And as part of that, there was actually a study done on waste collection in 2022 that we incorporated that looked at the number of fleet vehicles that would be required for the city to collect recyclables as well as waste. Curbside, we also included from the Less Waste, Better Baltimore plan and the Solid Waste Management plan, projections for how many collection vehicles would be needed for organics collection and included that in our analysis. So essentially in the short term, we projected at least 77 load packers, waste collection vehicles would report to the site within the next 5 years. And in the long term, that could increase to up near 90 for those separate waste streams, which is why we have 89 parking spaces right here. And that's essentially for all of those collection vehicles into the future for 30 plus years planning period. In terms of workers, so each of those collection vehicles does have 3 workers associated with it. All of those workers need a place to park. There's also administrative staff that works in the office building. They would also need a place to park. I believe there's about 16 administrative staff that would be reporting to the facility on any given day. And as we indicated previously, we estimated 222 workers at the facility on any given day. That's basically 3 per collection vehicle over the course of the planning period, which is how we get to these parking numbers. And that being said, we don't have a space for every worker. It is about 50% actually. To be inclusive of, we have bike parking at the site as well, to be inclusive of some of the workers maybe using alternative means of transportation to get to the site.
All right, thanks for that additional information. And then I guess one of the last discussion questions was related to have permeable paving feasibility for the site been considered? I guess specifically maybe looking at the staff parking area, that area may be a good candidate for pavers.
Yep. So unfortunately, we did look at it in the beginning. Unfortunately, as I indicated previously, this is under the jurisdiction of the Land Restoration Program as well. So they and as I indicated previously as well, they would like to see as much impervious area as possible at this site because they're trying to reduce infiltration to the maximum extent practicable, so that we don't mobilize potential contaminants of concern in the subsurface. And so that was no-go very quickly, although we did propose it. Because like you said, it would be great to use permeable pavers in the staff parking area, but it's just due to the nature of the site and the contaminants in the subsurface, it's not advised.
All right, so it was recommended by MDE to, I guess, to form like a more permanent cap there.
Yes, exactly.
All right, Chair Fisher.
Thank you. So given the understandable constraints related to infiltration, looking at the total lot coverage number, I noted in the staff report, this would push the site up to, I think, 14%, which is just below where we usually cap things off at 15. So I'm wondering about the site as a whole and any other longer term plans for the remainder of the site. We try not to create a situation where we're gonna force another conditional approval or a variance or something like that by building right up to the edge, so to speak, on the numbers. Are you all aware of any discussions or plans for lot coverage elsewhere on this site that would necessitate an additional approval in the future?
Sure, I can speak to that a little bit, but then I think I'll turn it over to Antoine for long-term plans for the rest of the site. But I know, so we did actually, since we are working with MDE on this and the Land Restoration Program, we did get a letter from them about a year ago indicating that they basically don't recommend, as I said previously, woody vegetation in anywhere where there isn't at least 6 feet of soil at the site. So one longer term recommendation from them was to do an analysis of the cap thickness throughout the site, just to see where we have at least 6 feet or not. Based on our investigation, which was just within our LOD, there were no places that had 6 feet already, which is one of the reasons why we imported fill so that we could actually have these plantings. So long term, we're not 100% sure. Right now, MDE just recommends the removal of woody vegetation from areas with less than 6 feet of cap. But there could potentially be an issue in the future where more of the site would require clearing if the Land Restoration Program requires it. So I'll let Antoine speak a little bit more to that. I think in that situation, I believe, Antoine, that there were potential, the city was looking into ideas or plans for the rest of the site if that came to be, right?
Yeah, so I mean, right now there's nothing definitive for the remainder of the site. The one thing that I could say that we expect to come to fruition is a walking trail or a biking trail that would come through the site, kind of right behind our facility, and then works its way through the edges of the site. But outside of that, there are a couple additional ideas that are under exploration, but not quite to the point where it's a feasible thing to move forward with. Given the letter from MDE with the expectation that we need to develop a plan to remove the woody vegetation, it is something that we will continue to explore, the most feasible option. But, you also got to keep in mind that, especially as we move away from this limit, our LOD at this point, we start to get deeper and deeper into the critical area. So that limits, even more what we can do, especially when you're talking about developing a new facility.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll open it up for any other comments or questions from commissioners. I don't see any other hands raised. I think today, the city, you did a great job really providing a lot of details and putting and providing substantive information for the commission staff. I think the takeaways from today is I think the focus was really just related to the parking spaces. So anything that can be done to reduce circling back on anything that maybe hasn't been considered to reduce the parking space numbers. There was some recommendations related to adding educational signage. I know the memo included critical area signage, but also taking an opportunity to include signage maybe with the value of separating waste, the history of the site, and maybe some stormwater management signage too. Anything else that I missed related to input from the staff and for the city to consider prior to having the project come to the project committee for a vote? All right, hearing nothing or seeing no raised hands, I guess we can conclude the one and only agenda item. And if there's no other comments from the Critical Area Commission staff, then I guess we will see everybody in person for the full commission meeting next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, bye-bye.
Great. Thank you for your time.